الحمد لله رب العالمين حمد الشاكرين العابدين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم صدق الله مولانا العظيم. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبه الكريم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون وصل على سيدنا محمد كلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون. صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله. In the initial part of today's discussion, I will continue the discussion that we left off with last week. In light of circumstances affecting the entire Ummah, we will hold this topic towards the end of our discussion and continue with it hopefully inshallah next week, as there's some important things to discuss about. Obviously each and every point from the Quran and Sunnah and from the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ is important, but there's some responsibilities that we need to try and fulfill, and that's what our discussion will be hopefully in relation to. As you will recall, last week we mentioned the situation of Sayyidah Halima radiallahu anha, that when she came with the women of her tribe and they all took a child with them, and she described that when it was time to go and I did not have any child with me, I said to my husband that by Allah, I do not want to return amongst my companions without having a child. Each one will have a child. So by Allah, we will take this, I will take this yatim, this orphan, and I will take him into our fostering and take him with us. As we mentioned last week, what the women were entirely looking at was the apparent worldly benefits that they had from other children, not knowing that the greatest benefit was in this child who was the master of all creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The husband said, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put blessings in for us, so let's take this child. So she says, I took the child, and the only thing that made me take this child was that we could not find any other child besides him. She says, when I took him, I carried on the journey. When I put him in my lap, he drank the milk as much as he wished, and he drank to the extent that he became satiated, full. And then his brother also drank, and he also became satiated. Then they slept, and he says, we had never had sleep in this way with the child before. As we mentioned last time, the situation of Sayyidah Halima radiallahu anha in the state of drought and with lack of food and drink herself was that when she would try to breastfeed her child, she would not manage to do so, because there was not enough energy within her body and enough nutrition within her body for this to occur. But this was one initial sign. And then after that, she says, my husband went to the camel and we found that it was now giving milk. And we took a lot of milk and we had the best night in terms of these blessings that arrived. She says, when we woke up in the morning, my husband said, "No, O Halima, by Allah, you and I have taken such a soul who is very, very blessed." And she said, "By Allah, I hope that this is the case." She says, then I rode on the donkey and we managed to travel with ease until her companions, a friend, said to her, "Is this not the same donkey that you used to come out with?" And she said, "Yes, by Allah, this is the same donkey." And they said, "By Allah, this is amazing. This is an amazing factor how this animal has now changed." These signs prior to announcement of prophethood are known as irhas. So when a prophet carries out a miracle after announcing prophethood, it is mu'jiza. And before announcing prophethood, if there is a miracle carried out, it is known as irhas. It's extremely important for us to know the difference between these different types of extraordinary acts. Because people see a normal person, a normal believer having an amazing factor and they say, "Oh, this is mu'jiza." But yet, for a normal believer, that cannot be mu'jiza. To the extent for a normal believer, that is not even a karama. So there's a differentiation in terms of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. To even a normal believer, an extraordinary act can happen, or an extraordinary characteristic can occur, not meaning that he is a wali, but because he is a sincere believer, he has this. And this is known as ma'una, as help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, I can ask Qibla Sufi Sahib to send out the information in this regard. But I will mention briefly to you that the difference. So we've got mu'jiza and irhas. Now these are the highest level of extraordinary acts because they are carried out by the prophets. And then you have karama, which is a miracle carried out by a wali. So it's something that goes against what you naturally expect or normally expect. But the friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted it. And the proof for this is within the Quran. So from Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam's nation, the man of knowledge stood up and said that I will bring the throne of Bilqis to you before you even blink. So initially the jinn stood and said that I will bring the throne from all these miles away before you stand from your place. So Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam would be seated for the entire morning. Within that small period of the morning, the jinn said, I will bring that throne to you. But the scholar, the person of knowledge, said that I will bring this throne within a blink of the eye. قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفه. But the beauty here is that the person who has karama is described in the Quran not as a wali. Rather, قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب, the one who has knowledge from the book. There are some people today who differentiate between knowledge of the deen and wilayah, as though these are two separate factors. But remember for sure that there cannot be a single wali who does not have knowledge of the Kitab and Sunnah. If they have knowledge of the Kitab and Sunnah, then and only then are they from the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in terms of is every person who has knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah a wali? That's not the case. But is every wali an alim of the Kitab and Sunnah? Yes. So not every alim is a wali, but every wali is certainly an alim, a scholar. Then we have people saying, oh, this person didn't need to go to a madrasa. Their knowledge came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. Then if you want to know the power of ilm ladunni, then that would be way ahead of the scholars of their time. And we had examples of such people who did not apparently learn entire courses under scholars, but the scholars would go to them and benefit from their knowledge. So if ilm ladunni exists in some claimants today, then their knowledge would be beyond the knowledge of the scholars. And unfortunately there's some who do not even know how to do sajda properly, who do not know the basic masail of tahara and salah, and then they go around condemning the people of knowledge and trying to take people away from the people of knowledge. And this is not the way of the true people of tasawwuf. This is not the way of the true people who uphold the teaching of the pious. Nevertheless, this was a point in relation to extraordinary acts. A believer can have this, and this is known as Mawlana, as assistance from the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason why the scholars of Tasawwuf said that al-istiqamatu fawqa al-karama, that being steadfast on the deen is more important for us when we're looking at the characteristic of a person, deciding whether this person has spiritual powers or not, is istiqama is more important than karama. For what reason? That sometimes extraordinary acts are given to people who are not really believers. They're disbelievers, and yet they carry out actions which are amazing to people, astonishing to people, and go against the natural phenomena. And this is known as istidraj. And sometimes what they're doing goes against them. So although it's an extraordinary act, it goes against their plan. So the person, for example, Musaylima Kadhab, a one-eyed person came to him. He was a liar who claimed prophethood. A one-eyed person came to him. He blew on the eye, and the other eye went as well. So it was an extraordinary act, but it went upside down for him. And this is known as ihana. So these signs that Sayyidah Halima radiallahu anha was seeing, these signs are ilhas. These signs are signs of prophethood before the announcement of prophethood. Throughout these 40 years of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, different signs have been seen of his greatness. And that's why those who were close to him were aware of his prophethood and aware that he is the final messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why those closest to him were not reluctant when the announcement of prophethood came to enter into Islam. So she says, we continuously were blessed with great goodness and increase until the 2 years that we were to have with Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to an end. And now it was time to go back to his mother. But she says, because we had seen all these blessings, we wanted to keep him with us. We could see what blessings we had through him. So we wanted that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam stay with us for longer. So we spoke to his mother, and she says that Halima says, I said, I fear for him that there's an illness spreading in Makkah al-Mukarramah. So allow him to stay with us for longer. And we continuously requested until Sayyidah Amina radiallahu anha permitted them to return with him. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She states, and we returned with him, and these blessings continued. But then an amazing situation occurred 1 month later. Now whilst he was grazing the animals with his brother behind the houses, his brother came extremely anxious, and he said to his father that 2 men have taken Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They had white clothes on, and they made him lie down, and they opened up his chest. And so she says that myself and my husband, we ran to find him, and we found him standing with a shining face, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We held on to him and we said, what happened? And he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, mentioned that two men came with white clothes and they made him lie down and they cut his stomach and they sought something out from the stomach. And so she says that we went back to our house. And then the father said that I fear, based on this event, I fear for this child. So let's take him back to his family before more things start becoming apparent. So she says we went back to his mother. Sayyidah Amina radiallahu anha asked, what brought you so quickly when you were so eager that you keep him with you? She said that we have fulfilled what we needed to and we are giving him back to you as you wished. Sayyidah Amina said, speak the truth, because this is not the case. So Sayyidah Halima says, Sayyidah Amina continued asking until we informed her. Then Sayyidah Amina asked them. And remember, when something of this extraordinary nature is occurring, then this question or this thought may have come in their mind, not knowing that this is the master of all creation, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She said, do you fear that there's some shaitan or evil jinn affecting this child? And they said, yes. She said, Kalla wallahi ma li shaitani alayhi min sabil. She said, by Allah, the shaitan does not have any path or any means to get to this child. وَإِنَّ لِبُنَيْكَ لَشَأْنًا. She said, my child has a great matter. Should I not inform you of his situation? When I was expecting him, I saw a light coming out from me, through which the palaces of the area of Busra from the land of Sham became enlightened. And I carried him and he was the most lightest in terms of carrying. There was no burden, there was no difficulty. And I gave birth to him with ease. And when I gave birth to him, I saw that his head was raised towards the skies. So leave him, indeed he has a matter that you cannot understand. These are some aspects and other aspects based upon which scholars such as Imam Jalaluddin as-Suyuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, wrote works establishing the iman of the parents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam parents were believers, and he took proof from the Quran and various ahadith in regards to this. But that, inshallah, is something that we can discuss in coming discussions. In the last part of our discussion today, we are all aware of the dire situation in the blessed land of Palestine. And this is a land, the Quran describes the area around Masjid al-Aqsa as alladhi barakna hawlahu, that we have blessed the area around it. It's a land which has been blessed with the prophets alayhi wassalatu wassalam. Many prophets resided there and are buried there. There are areas within this land which are beloved to people, not only Muslims, but to Jews and Christians as well. And our Master sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned the greatness of Al-Aqsa in various narrations. There's one narration that I was going to mention, that if I mention that, I'm probably going to mention some other points in discussion and the time will conclude. So I'm going to mention the narration of Sunan al-Nasa'i. That Sayyidina Abdullah bin Amr radiallahu anhu narrates that the Master of all creation sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, who built Masjid al-Aqsa, and the manner in which he built the masjid is described within the Quran. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he concluded from building the masjid, that whoever comes to this masjid should leave. He asked in the court of Allah, that, oh Allah, grant this acceptance to this masjid, that whoever comes to Masjid al-Aqsa, and the only reason why he comes is to perform salah in this masjid, that he should leave it in such a way that it is as though it is the day that his mother gave birth to him. In the same way, our Master sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stated in a hadith narrated by Sayyidah Salma radiallahu anha, that the one who entered into ihram for Hajj or Umrah from Masjid al-Aqsa and came to Masjid al-Haram, his sins will be forgiven, his past and future sins will be forgiven. And in one narration it stated, وَجَبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ, Jannah becomes necessary for him. In the same way, in a narration also of Sayyidah Salma radiallahu anha, it is stated that the Master of all creation sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever entered into ihram for Umrah from Baytul Maqdis, from Jerusalem, it will be a kafara for what preceded it from the sins. So this masjid and its virtue is not hidden from any Muslim. And the oppression and torment faced by the Palestinian people is not hidden from any human being, let alone Muslim, any human being. It's not only Muslims who are standing up against the oppression and torment faced by the people of Palestine and Gaza specifically, but it is rather people of all religions and no religion as well. Included in them are those who follow the text of the Jewish religion to the core. Many people from the Orthodox Jews are anti-Zionist, are against Zionism, and they also stand up vehemently and strongly against what is happening in Palestine and in Palestine. So it is important for us as Muslims that we do what we can, what is in our capacity, to stand up against the injustices that are occurring, and to do dua for our Muslim brothers and sisters. One way for this is to write to our MP and to request him strongly to raise our concerns in relation to the situation in Palestine. One of the most horrific aspects of the dialogue and words of these oppressors and criminals is that they've even denied the humanity of these Muslims. They've denied that these people are even human beings, to the extent that the Israeli Defense Minister said, I'll order the complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we act accordingly. These words should strike at the heart of every human being, but especially us as Muslims. This is a huge stab in the heart of every Muslim. And in terms of legally and according to international human rights, this is an it extremely goes against the very core of why we have international human rights in the first place. So legal experts have made it very clear that this order is a massive war crime and very likely a crime against humanity. They say very likely a crime against humanity, that's their words. So I'm just quoting theirs. Otherwise, it is and indeed is a crime against humanity. Furthermore, the presence of competence within a civilian population does not affect its civilian character. Meaning that area where there are competence, even if the civilians around, that is classed to be a civilian area. So what we can do, aside from dua, is to send an email to our MP. That's one thing we can do, along with so many other ways of raising our voice. Now in terms of how to word the email, there are wordings that Imams here can share, which I will be discussing with Qibla Sufi Sahib. They can share these wordings to anyone who wishes to share them. One thing that we also want to make extremely clear is that this stand against the violence, oppression, extreme crimes by Israel and the Zionists is in no way anti-Semitism. It is no way a meaning that we stand against or that we are condemning every single Jew. Like I said earlier, there are many members of the Jewish community who stand with us against the oppression of the Israelis and who make it very, very clear that the Palestinian people should be given their rights. In terms of the alienation of those who seek freedom and labeling them with different names, we should look back to the history of every struggle for freedom. If Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah was bothered by the labeling and the targeting of those who control the media, Pakistan would not be existent today. In the same way, if Nelson Mandela was to be affected by the labeling and targeting by the people around, by the media around that time, South Africa would not have been independent today. And not only that, when we look back to what these people faced in terms of prison, and one aspect of South Africa as a person who stayed there, I can tell you is that the Muslims had a huge role in the freedom and independence of South Africa. There were Muslims who were in the prisons for 27 years along with Nelson Mandela for the independence of South Africa. So at that time, what was the labeling of those people who stood for that independence? It's the same sort of labeling that goes on today. We want to make it very, very clear. We do not stand for extremism. We do not stand for terrorism in any form, whether it be by an individual or whether it be by a state. And we are extremely, extremely disturbed by so-called leaders of Western civilization. And to call this a civilization when they are giving the green light for the complete annihilation of a group of people, of human beings, and depriving them of air, of water, of electricity, of food, and depriving the ill and their children from healthcare, and saying we stand with this. This is not something that we stand with, and it's not something that we can ever stand with. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free us from the oppressive tyrants, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to do all that is within our capacity to stand for the truth. Ameen.